c'è il countdown.
L'ora di festeggiare 2021.
Speriamo che arrivi presto. Good afternoon, Milan. Good morning, New York. We are very pleased and happy to host at Milan Wine Week this special tasting by PASQUA Wines. PASQUA is actually one of the founding partners of Milano Wine Week, and we are honored to host them today for this special tasting, which is actually, can I say this, Riccardo, the first and only international blind tasting that we will host during our international masterclass session. So I welcome, first of all, Riccardo Pasqua, CEO of PASQUA Wines, and Alessandro Torcoli, that will lead the tasting. He's the director of Civiltà del Bere, one of the main Italian wine journals. So thank you very much. We are very pleased to have you in Milan, even from New York. This is the digital wine tasting, and I leave the space to Riccardo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Federico. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you all here in Milan and in New York to attend our masterclass. I'm very proud to announce that it's the only blind tasting of the Milano Wine Week, so fasten your seatbelt because Alessandro prepared a very interesting panel to taste all together. To the benefit of our New Yorker friends, I would like to introduce myself very quickly, and then we go fast towards the tasting. I'm Riccardo Pasqua. I'm a winemaker from Verona, in the Veneto region, more precisely in Valpolicella. We are a family winery since 1925, so I'm the third generation of winemakers. The most of our production are from the most iconic valleys of Valpolicella. We are big exporters. We export in more than 70 countries around the world. USA is by far our first export market, and therefore we are very glad to be connected to the center of the US world, New York City. And therefore we thought, why don't we challenge ourselves? Why don't we challenge the Valpolicella with this blind tasting that will drive you through very interesting wines and very interesting organoleptic profile. But I don't want to say too much because I'm already pushing it a little too far. What I want to say to close my introductory speech is that I'm very glad to have here with me Alessandro Torcoli. Alessandro Torcoli is one of the most important and influential journalist and wine taster in Italy by far, and with Alessandro we did already over the past years a lot of projects together, a lot of tastings, a lot of blind tastings, putting together wines that you wouldn't expect, and every time is always a surprise. Every time is a lot of learning. Every time it's really beautiful to see how all the wines from the different regions come out and why. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a big applause to Alessandro Torcoli.
Thank you, Riccardo. So first of all, good evening to you here in Milan and to our friends in New York again. This is really an honor to be here and to conduct the first and only blind tasting during the Milano Wine Week. Well, I've been used to organize blind tastings for years, since I started my program at the Institute of Masters of Wine. And from that moment on, this became a mania. So as often as I can, I organize my tasting blind. Especially when I judge wines, of course, because I think that the ideal way to understand and then judge a wine is not to know the name of the producers. Please, our friends sommelier now are serving all the wines, trying to be as blind as possible. Thank you, thank you. And so I learned that, first of all, this is the ideal way to judge the wines, because you can concentrate only and definitely on the main characteristics of the wines and the basics of the wine, and understand from nose and palate basically how really is the wine. But not only is the way to open your mind and to take a journey on different places, trying to understand what are the real differences and the reasons why you buy or you sell, depending from the point of view, a wine. So this is why we started with PASQUA, this project some years ago, organizing these tastings together with the staff, with all the team, and Riccardo gathers all the stuff entirely, from the marketing department to the export department, and of course the technicians and the winemakers. And it's really beautiful to see, first of all, how each of us perceive differently the wine, depending on what we do. As a journalist, I'm looking for something. As a winemaker, they are looking for something different, and so the others. But in the end, we all want to sum up and see why a wine is different from another, and how I can buy or sell it. Why I buy it, what I like of that, and how could I sell it better. Better in pricing, better in the marketing, the distribution, and all that. This is the starting point for us to organize this tasting, not to judge the wines. I want to declare this immediately. This is not a competition. We don't want the winner here. And to say that our wines, Italian wines, are the best in the world. I'm quite convinced that they are, but I'm Italian, so that doesn't matter that much. But I think that many countries everywhere express great wines. And as an international taster, I really like this, and I like to find the best wines everywhere. So it was a joke. I don't think that we have to say that we're better than others, better than French, or better than Napa wines. We just want to understand really why we are different. And this is the purpose of the tasting, to compare, obviously, wines that can be compared. So we looked for styles, and style is the key word for me always when I communicate wine and when I share my love for wine with people. Because in Italy, for example, we don't use this very much, the concept of style. But I know that you in New York, for example, in the US, and the international markets, this is a very important word, and we want to discuss the style of the wine and to compare different origins from the same style, for example. So we try to find wines that can be, in a way, compared. What I mean, that if you're looking for a big, bold, big-shouldered wine with a character, with concentration, red wines, of course, I'm saying, you will look for maybe 5 or 6 countries that are producing the best wines in this style of the big reds with alcohol, structure, acidity, and so on. So if you live in New York or in London or also in Milan, because Milan is an international and more international city. Even if in Italy, of course, we have a tendency to drink and taste several great wines coming from our country. But in a big city like Milano or Rome, for example, many, especially young people, are looking for different wines from different countries. So they like to compare the red wines from Tuscany to the Bordeaux wines and to the Napa wines, and they love the difference. And this big picture that the world of wine is able to give us back. So in this case, we have 4 origins, really. So we have 2 wines coming from Veneto and from Valpolicella, of course. This is no mystery, since PASQUA is our host today. And so the exercise will be, first of all, to find which are the 2 Italian wines, of course, in the panel, and then to try and understand the other 3 origins. Of course, you know that for this styles of wine, there are not so many origins that you can look for, because we are comparing big reds from Valpolicella, and I want to anticipate that the 2 wines from Valpolicella are Amarone. Because, of course, if we are talking stylistic matters, we have to know that we are about to taste 2 Amarone in the flight. So I went and looked for wines that a consumer might choose differently from Amarone, but in the same or similar style. Of course, there is a uniqueness in Amarone that none of the other wines have. That is the appassimento style. So Amarone, you know, is a passito, basically, a wine from dried grapes. So this is very special and different. But when we are tasting dry reds like Amarone is, otherwise you go to Recioto, that is the sweet version of the Valpolicella reds. These are all dry wines, all 5. And so we'll see. Now we are waiting for the sommelier. How is the situation in New York? Do you have all the wines? Who can answer to me from New York? Let's see and wait. Because we are at the 3rd wine. So we will start tasting in a moment, and then we'll see in the end. Okay, so we start, and then we go back to the specific tasting and the guessing of the origins and the wines later on. Let's start from wine number 1. So in this case, because we don't have all the wines on the table, I will comment each wine, and I will try to go with you and reason about the origins of the grapes, blah, blah. And we will discover the wine immediately, and then we will go to the next one. Otherwise, it would be a bit boring to wait until the end to see what we are tasting. I know you'd like to know this earlier. Wine 1, but very quickly I'll go to wine 2 and 3. Can I start commenting the 3 all together? Do they in New York have the same wines on the table? Yes, okay, so you immediately see that among these 3, there is one that is a little bit less immediate at the nose, less intense in terms of fruit profile. Which one is it for you? Who wants to answer? Don't be shy. here in Milan at least. It's quite a bit difficult to wait for the answers from New York, but here in Milano, what do you think? 1, 2, or 3 is the less perfumed, the less intense, the more restrained, the more serious in a way of the 3. Serious in brackets, I mean. I'll tell you for me what it is. For me, it's number 3. You'll have, especially in number 2, you have a big fruit, very, very intense, blackberry, red fruits, and a balsamic note, very intense. And these wines want to jump out of the glass and say, hey, try me, taste me, just from the nose. Number 1, as well, and a bit less, but you can smell how intense is this red fruit, especially this mulberry fruit, red and mulberry fruit. Mulberry is the blackberries, and similar to the blackberries. And still very fruity as number 2. One number 1 and wine number 2 are the fruitier. So number 3, what will it be? Let's taste the 3 rapidly. Wine number 1 is immediate, fruity. The entrance in the mouth is really smooth. And the fruitiness stays on the palate for a long time. Of course, we are comparing very good wines, all the 5, because we have 2 Amarone in the flight. And Amarone, you know, because the position of Amarone on the market is high, obviously, because it's a great wine, high price. And so we try to find something that could be compared, of course. So no doubt that this is a high quality wine with intensity, with depth, with length. But it's very fruity and very round on the finish. The roundness in this case is not the fact I would focus on, because again, also Amarone is a round wine, depending on the style, and also in the PASQUA family, they make different styles of Amarone, a little bit rounder and a bit drier. And in this case, in the flight, we have this example of 2 different styles. One has more sugar in it, and the other one a bit less. But apart from sugar, the style and the perception on the palate is very different between the 2 Amarone that we will have in the flight. But back to number 1, it's very fruity and round, and has an intense spice baked note from the oak, from partially new oak, that we can smell and taste. A bit of vanilla, but baked spice, and this toast aroma. Wine number 2, that we said is the fruitiest of the 3, and the more balsamic, gives this balsamic note back on the palate. Again, is very, very fruity. The concentration of the fruit and the maturity of the fruit is great. And it's really from ripe fruit. But will you perceive a dried grapes note or something like that from the appassimento that will be in the Amarone? No, I smell and taste in these 2 wines always fresh fruit, very ripe fruit from sunny places. And we'll see one of the 2 is really hot and sunny, the other one a little bit less, well, not this year, maybe even more, but number 1 and 2 come from warm, very warm climates, as you can smell from the ripe fruit on the nose, but especially taste. You can taste on the palate this plush, rich, round, and very, very ripe fruit. Number 3, we haven't tasted yet. a little more restrained at the nose, as said, and on the palate. Acidity is definitely higher than in number 1 and 2, first clue. The sensation on the palate is not only of fruit, it's very fruity wine, but not only, it's more, let's say, mineral or earthy, if you want, a little bit more complex with more gravelly note. And there's a combination that is very typical for this wine of ripeness and unripeness and acidity punging on the finish especially, because you have this plush round sensation at first on the palate, but then when you're finished and wine is gone, you feel something pungent is coming out, something that invites you to the next glass that is less ripe in the end than the other two. But you have also, and this is also at the nose, definitely, this dried fruit note, dried grapes. So, this is no mystery anymore, I think, that number 3 is the Amarone. Amarone della Valpolicella, Famiglia PASQUA, one of the 2 labels that we are about to taste from the family. Vintage 15, 2015. Very good, classic, warm vintage. And rich wine. 15 ABV. Of course, you know Amarone from dried grapes, concentration of sugars. The alcohol is always quite high. Between 15 and 16 and a half, 16 in some cases. It's quite high. And we went and looked for equally alcoholic and warm wines. Now we have all the wines I have. No, you don't. So, but we can taste number 4. So we have one wine. That is number 3. That is the Amarone. Let's go on. Number 4. Oh, a very intense again. Very rich. In this case, I wouldn't say just fruity. This is not fruit-driven, really, but very intense and direct. Very classy, very ample. This nose is really impressive. From black fruits, cassis, but much further you have tobacco, you have chocolate, you have clove. So many things in this glass. Let's taste it. A very rich, dense, compact wine. Another wine with a very ripe fruit. Very precise. It's a very vertical wine. And very long. The perception is very long. And with this aftertaste, really earthy, classy, with this sweet tobacco on the finish and baked spice. And then the black fruits again, a really complex wine, highly qualitative. Of course, the vintage maybe will change a little bit. And I can declare now, because it's better if you want to understand the wine, that in this case we have a 2013 vintage compared to the previous one. The Amarone is 15. Wine number 2 is 17, is the younger of the flight, and 1 is 15 again, like the Amarone. Now we have all the wines, so we can finish and then back to our reasoning. Jumping from 4 to 5, again you have this impression of less intense aroma, less fruity. It is intense, it is a complex and rich aroma, but less direct and pungent in a way than number 4. A more educated wine, we could say, or less expansive. Can we say expansive? Yes. Showing off. Less. On your face. Yes, less on your face. At the taste, wow, you have concentration, you have this caramel note of the very ripe grapes, you have spice, the black fruits, the dried cherries, dried strawberries, but a lot of tertiary, starting a tertiary point in tobacco, coffee, roasted coffee, and the earthiness I like of this wine, and is a difference in comparison to the others. Really herbal and spiced. Very rich, very alcoholic, but number 4 was 15, and so it wasn't a lean and thin wine, of course. None is that style. But the last one, what would you say the alcohol is in this wine? Come on, amici from Milano. Give me a number. Give me a number. High. He says high. No, a bit less. But almost. This is 16.5. You would pass because you have a tolerance of 0.5 in the exam. Okay, so this is very high, and this is higher, the highest of the flight. So, with this alcohol, what do you think this is? The Amarone. This is the second Amarone. Very good. Well done. And this is the Amarone Maidiremai. That is the new project, quite new, from a family. How many editions of the Maidiremai? 4 or 3?
This is the 4th.
This is the 4th vintage. Great. As the vintage is 12 in this case, but the last one?
So, sorry,
the third. Okay.
First vintage was 2010.
10, yes. That, just to recall it, the first vintage when you could put the DOCG on your label. Yeah. So Amarone became a DOCG wines from vintage 2010. This is 12. This is an 8 years old wine, but it's so a bit of tertiary aroma is coming out, but a little bit. This is still very young. And this is a very long-term vision wine. And this is a classic, I can say. If you close your eyes and you try to imagine something different from Amarone, I had an impression of very classy Bordeaux wine from a very warm vintage for some of the notes that, of course, not from all, but from some of the notes from, for example, this gravelly note, this earthy note, and that very educated toasted note. But then you have an extra of fruit that comes, and of course the perception of dried fruit that is unique from Amarone. But it's on the palate that this is a special and different Amarone. If you want to compare, before we play the game of guessing the other origins, I suggest to compare the two Amarone from Pasqua family. Very different styles. And this is Maidiremai, number 5. This is much more serious wine, I mean with serious closed at the beginning, vertical and mineral wine, let's say like this, vertical and mineral wine. And of course much more long and concentrated. In fact, it is meant to live a long life, isn't it?
Yeah, I want to add a couple of words on the two Amarone. I think is the good moment to do it. They are indeed very, very different between them. And the reason is, first of all, the soil, the terroir, the soil. So in the first case, in the Famiglia Pasqua 2015, we are in a fatter soil, pretty fat soil, with come si dice argilla in inglese?
Marl and clay.
Clay origin. So pretty rich soil. The idea of this Amarone, which is our current vintage Amarone, so this is what we consider our gastronomic Amarone, is to have a very agile, straightforward, modern, vertical glass of Amarone, very drinkable, very round. It's still, of course, you get the traditional marasca notes from the Corvina
very
side
fruity.
of the blend, very fruity, but
it's easier to compare it to other wines in the flight because they are so fruity, like the Amarone is indeed. I would mention the sugars. It's very important because for the Famiglia Pasqua number 3, sugar is 10 grams per liter. In Maidiremai, the conception is completely different, and the sugar also is, and it's 4.5. So it's very dry, bone dry Amarone.
Yeah, Famiglia Pasqua is, to finish the story, is from 3 different crews: San Felice, Castello di Montorio, and Mizzole. So here we are in the eastern side of Valpolicella. Geographically, is the name of the valley is Valpantena, is of course inside the appellation, but what in Italy we call it Valpolicella Orientale, or the emerging Valpolicella, from where
Eastern Valpolicella.
Eastern Valpolicella. And Maidiremai, on the other side, comes from a little hill between the villages of Mezzane and Illasi, called Montevegro. Montevegro, literally in English, is translated as a hill that you cannot cultivate, because the soil is so lean, rocky, and difficult for anything to root down and get nutrition that is very difficult to do any sort of agriculture back then. That's why they called it Montevegro. But you know, when the game get tough, the tougher get going, you know, as you say in English. So no pain, no gain, very difficult terroir. What comes out is really exceptional. That's why we called it Maidiremai. It's a beautiful piece of land, 600 meters above the sea level. Behind the shoulder, there's the Mount Lessini, blowing very fresh winds pretty constantly. So the idea of Maidiremai Amarone is to have on the Alessandro words and notes something immortal, something that we want to open 40 years from now and really say, wow, what is this? This is still vibrant, alive, and have many years ahead of it, like, as Alessandro said, the big wines of the world. So the aim of my family and the aim of this project is to build something, a bottle of wine that is slow, that needs time in the bottle, needs time in the glass, and again, you can open it in literally 30, 40 years and still be very impressed.
Yeah, I went there on this Montevedro, and I can assure you, this is an amazing place with a beautiful view, but you can smell and see the difficulties and the exceptionality of the place. So let's move on and see what we put aside next to these two Amarone. Back to number one. Now, after tasting all the wines, is even more fruity than before. This is fruity, but you can taste something that is typical from this place. That is a combination of the high acidity, because acidity, in the end, you can feel it in your mouth, and it's going on and on. It's very high, pungent, and a very sunny place, a very ripe fruit. So in this case, you have altitude, because the vineyards for this wine are very, very high, among the highest in the world. So you have very cool temperatures at night, you have the cool winds, but you have a lot of sun. So you are somewhere in the warm part of the world. Second thing, this is a place where they make the majority of a very typical red wine, but in this case we chose a sample that is 83% Cabernet Sauvignon, some more, say, horizontal and worldwide spread grape variety. Otherwise, it would have been really literally too difficult and not very meaningful to put their typical grape variety. This is from a family as a PASQUA family with a long story, long for the region, and with many vineyards where they choose the best sites, and as always, for these cuvées, this is one of the best cuvées for the family. In the New World especially, so this wine comes from the New World of wine. They have this habit, very interesting, that is the choice of the best grapes from even very different spots and very distant spots and places. Sometimes very, very distant, 100 or 400 kilometers in some cases, in some places. But they want to choose the best of the best in a big area. So it's a great selection of vineyards. In this case, we have 1, 2, 3 distant and vineyards from the best places in the region. Who would like to try and say where this wine could come from? I gave you some clues. I'm sure that in New York, some of our friends would get the right place. New World, with a combination of warm climate and altitude and freshness and some coolness. This is another bit, I'll tell you another bit. This is 83% Cabernet Sauvignon and 17%, I'll tell you the magic word, Malbec. So where are we? Argentina. Very good. We could have chosen like 100% Malbec. We have several of them, but it's too different. So this is a wine from Argentina. This is a Bodega Catena Zapata, And the cuvée is Nicolas Catena Zapata, 2015, 14 ABV. The next one, when you go back to glass, the balsamic note is even more intense than earlier. It's really, boom, pungent. And we have other characteristic notes of this grape variety. Who want to just to express some notes from the nose that can help us understand the grape variety and from there, maybe the origin? What do you feel? What do you smell? A couple of notes. I smell a lot of strawberry in this wine, of ripe strawberry, of course, the balsamic that I already said, and a very meaty character under the fruit. The tobacco. This is a 17, it's quite a young wine, but a little step back, we said that is a fruity, intense, very direct wine. So I would put this again in the New World, okay? Not in Portugal, not in Spain, not in Italy, not in France, not in Greece, but in the New World. Then you have this meaty and strawberry note, and there's another aroma that might lead you there. That is a sweet spice note, a cocoa note, and a coconut touch. Please. And cinnamon, no, you're right. Also, yes, and it's baked space or space, very intense space. Spice, not space, sorry. And so, these chocolate, strawberries, meaty, blah, blah, lead usually to Syrah. Otherwise, and somewhere said Shiraz. And where is Shiraz planted? Mostly out of the Old World, in Australia. So this second wine comes from Australia. And where is the most typical and traditional region in Australia, valley in Australia to grow Shiraz? Barossa. So this is a very typical Barossa Valley Australian Shiraz, but comes also from the one of the best small areas in the region of Barossa, that is Marananga. Is in the center, the very center of the region Barossa, and is very, very, very dry and hot climate, but with some refreshing wind that helps, because otherwise these grapes would be really cooked, and they are not. The wine maintains its freshness. So what drives us to Australia also? This very intense balsamic note is very typical from Australia. And the roundness, a roundness that we also have in the Amarone style, and in these big reds with a smooth and very round palate. You know that in the past, especially Australia, gave us very rich and full of sugars wines, whites and reds. They loved the style of it. Now they are putting a little bit, leaving a little less sugar in their wines, because this is not really still appreciated, and the consumers are looking for drier wines also from Australia. So this is 12 months in American oak. 28% of this American oak is new, and this gives the intense spice, cinnamon, and this coconut touch. And the French oak as well, for 25% new. But oak is quite prominent still in the wine. You have this intense spice and sweet spice note. Alcohol is 14.5. The third one is Amarone Famiglia Pasqua. We've already said many things about it. And the fourth one. For me, in a blind tasting, this would be, of course, for me, it's not now a blind tasting, so it's a bit unfair for me because I'm here, I know the wines, it's easy for me to understand. But anyway, being honest, in a flight, this one would give me some troubles. It's really difficult. I wouldn't really say, because it's so classy and so international in a way. It's in the middle between the new world, the old world. So I would think, what could it be from also Tuscany, I could say, or South Africa, you know, or in Stellenbosch, they are making really French and stylish wines. Napa Valley, very classy, international and wine, or again Argentina, but I would expect a little bit more fruit. Chile, another option, because they have a French school there, many winemakers from France, so they make this, at the high end, they make very classy, very elegant and serious wines. So could be very difficult. But let's try and think. The alcohol is high, some 15 at least. The fruit is very hot, so very, 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 very ripe. So we could maybe rule out some regions like Tuscany. This is maybe too much to be Tuscany. On South Africa, again, because it has a little bit too much of fruit to be South African, and sometimes you get this smoky, meaty note in South African wines. Of course, might come from, but just playing, I would discharge. So I would discuss between Napa Valley and Chile, or something from there. What would you say? Let's change, because he's giving all the answers. So. Someone want to express a thought, a guess? No. Well, this is from Napa. It's a very classy Napa wine from Beringa, and is the private reserve Cabernet Sauvignon from Beringa. It's 96% Cabernet Sauvignon, 3% of Franc, and just 1% of Petit Verdot. But Petit Verdot it's crazy. 1 or 2% is enough. And so what do you think of this wine? This is really elegant. You wouldn't say, oh, this is a New World wine full of oak, full of blah, blah. No, it's very educated, and the oak is already, it is 7 years old, so already, you know, it's very ample, and different notes at the nose are coming out. But especially from Napa, we are sharing really classy and European style wines. You know that there was the Judgment of Paris, but that was 40 years ago, I think. So, and at the time, at a big blind tasting with the big judges, big critics, wine critics, declared that the best Cabernet Sauvignon in a row of the best from Bordeaux, from everywhere in the world, was a Napa wine. They didn't understand, and they were sure it was a Bordeaux wine, because they've been working for a long time to have very high-end and perfect, exceptional wines. Because we are used to have this idea of some places in the New World especially, of easygoing, fruity, very round, obvious wines. But it is not like this anymore. And it hasn't been like this for at least 15 years. From everywhere in the New World, from South Africa, Australia, Chile, Argentina, and so on, you can find this style of wines. And so this is challenging for Italian and French producers, for example, because now we are competing with, we are not anymore divided into two worlds. To be easy, we describe this as New World and Old World, but now it's all confused and all mixed up with great wine. Great wine is great wine. And so this is an occasion, this is not a competition, as I said at the beginning, but this is an occasion to see how, in a row like this, with beautiful wines, all very elegant, very, well, these are more than drinkable wines, all of them. They're great wines. And we can choose, we can see the real difference. We want something a little more balsamic and a little bit rounder, a little bit fruitier, a little bit, not that much. We can go to Australia, for example, or to Argentina and Chile sometimes, even if we are not tasting the Chilean wines. We want something more gravelly, something more earthy, meaty, maybe something special for meat. And we go to Valpolicella, but also Napa Valley, as we just seen. And also for Amarone, that once was a very different wine, from dried grapes, quite sweet. And so it was unique. You like it or you don't like it. Now it's competing with all of these styles of wines, but a bit different. If you want this sensation, a little bit of dried fruits, of almonds, of nuts, of marmalade, cherry marmalade. Amarone is your wine because you have a lot of this, a lot of cherry, of the fruit that is not a banal and simple fresh fruit. Is rich, opulent, and always evolved, because Amarone has a long aging always. And in the best cases, the Riserva, for example, is very long aging. How much is the Riserva? Is more than 3 or more than 5? The Riserva Amarone? No, Riserva in general. Minimum 5 years. So you will have, from the year that the Riserva is out, an old wine evolved in the cellar and the bottle. I hope it was interesting to travel together and see the differences between Amarone and the others. And for me, it's always a good job to analyze wines in this way. So thank you very much for coming and for being with us. And have a nice day in New York this morning for you. So
it's due to have a little Q&A session if any question
of course, yes,
may arise. I want to just add that in a week where you have a lot of verticals, horizontals, a lot of traditional in brackets tastings. At PASQUA we always try to do something different, so we wanted to send you a message, to that Valpolicella wants to, travel the world and open their windows and try different comparisons. And for sure, we are very proud, to be representing one of the most iconic wine region in Italy. Indeed, not scared of challenge, and I thought it was, it was interesting to bring an exercise that usually we do in our house, no, between our key people and therefore professional salesmen or winemakers or wine marketers. I'm sure some of this room could be as well, but I was interested to see your face and hopefully hear some of your opinions. And again, I think it's, I don't know if the time allow us to open a quick Q&A session, questions and answers. Please don't be shy. It's the right time to do it.
So, starting from Milano. Domande? Curiosità? Approfittate del maestro. Piaciuti i vini? Sì, ok. Bel sì sonoro, grazie. Fa piacere. Grazie. Intanto aspettiamo dalla regia, abbiamo domande from New York?
No, from New York for the moment we don't have any question.
Ok, super, allora salutiamo.
Salutiamo. A questo punto, at this point, on behalf of my family and on behalf of Valpolicella Valleys, we thank you very much for your attendance. I think it was a lot of fun, as always, with Alessandro. I thank you, Alessandro, as always.
Thank you.
A great ride from continent to continent. And thank you, guys, here in Milan to attend. Great to see you. Well done. You got 2 out of 5, not bad.
Not bad.
Yes, you. And
Yeah.
thank you, Federico, for the introduction. So,
Thank you.